Hello everyone. Our topic this week was requested by Nocturnal74. We'll be going over the Cabal from the Destiny franchise. Spoilers for all things Destiny. The
Cabal are one of the primary alien races found in the Destiny games and extended media, alongside the Fallen, the Hive, and the Vex, all of whom are enemy factions. In their current iteration, they are a highly militarized nation who build for war, function, and intimidation. As a species, and there has been no name beyond Cabal given for the creatures, the Cabal are tall, we'd estimate somewhere in the 8 to 9 feet range, broadly built bipedal creatures. They appear to have a tough hide, generally in gray and brown tones, and are possessed of incredible physical strength and, at least combined with their armor, similarly impressive durability. There are some indications that females of the species grow tusks, as all but one Cabal shown with tusks has been female. There is one male Cabal shown with tusked armor, however, whether those tusks are part of his helmet or his actual face is unclear. Interestingly, they seem to have developed on a comparatively wet, moist, humid planet, as one function of their combat suits is to pump a gel, which also serves as fuel for many of their vehicles, somehow, around and against their skin in order to help keep it hydrated. Some notes indicate that Cabal armor is also a pressure suit, which would indicate their home atmosphere had a higher pressure or density composition than what we're familiar with on Earth. However, that seems unlikely as numerous Cabal unit designs, particularly more recent units, have been shown wearing more open armor designs with exposed arms, legs, head, or some combination thereof, which would be unfeasible armor designs for creatures that needed pressure suits to survive Earth-like atmospheres. As a final note on the species, they are evidently an exceptionally long-lived race, as multiple Cabal have been noted to be several hundred years old, with a smaller handful being referenced as living to possibly multiple thousands of years old.
The Cabal, as a people, as the name implies, are a collection of races, all subservient to the primary Cabal race, umbrellaed under the massive Cabal Empire. The only one of these vassal species ever encountered in-game are the Scions, a physically smaller, slighter race with significant psionic might, who share a racial mental connection with a loosely defined range, who often act as the Cabal's tech, psionics, and space magic experts. The Cabal also field hordes of lizard-like hound creatures, though whether these beasts are native to the Cabal's home planet or are technically another alien species from the Empire is unknown. Extended lore bits have named at least a handful of other species that are or were under the Empire's umbrella, with references to vassal species from the Empire's Golden Age existing in numbers beyond counting. But there have been a lot of changes to Cabal society over the millennia, so let's start at the beginning. The first notable event in Cabal history comes from a legend told of how their empire began, back before their influence spanned notable chunks of the galaxy. The tale speaks of a great mountain on their home world, atop which sat the sun, guarded by a mighty beast. 3 warriors approached the beast, each intent on claiming the power and majesty of the sun. The first tried to sneak around the beast but was caught. The second tried to outwit the beast but failed. The third engaged the beast in glorious single combat. This last hero also failed, but wounded the beast deeply. Many more heroes would try to slay the creature, each failing as had those before, but each marring the beast with a new, fresh wound, until finally a Cabal named Acreus slew the great beast and claimed the power of the sun, becoming the Cabal's first emperor. The story reinforces the recurring value of challenge and combat in Cabal society, but also the importance of every soldier on the battlefield, even those that fall or seemingly fail, as without each of their contributions, final victory may not have been possible. Note, not all Cabal leaders take this stance, but it is a lesson to be learned from the story that some have used.
After that, much of the Cabal's early history is vague. For indeterminate centuries or millennia, they expanded throughout the stars. Military doctrine was foremost in their culture, with a common practice both to settle disputes and ascend in society being a challenge of right by combat, where the victor was obviously right and or more deserving of a higher social status. They conquered or absorbed many other species they encountered, and while the Emperor ruled highest in the imperial courts, just below the Emperor's rule was the Praetorate, a kind of military aristocracy that, at least according to one source, maintained power through control of the military legions, whom they controlled by denying the legions citizenship in the Empire? Not sure how that happened in a warrior society, but sure. We don't start getting detail on the Cabal until the reign of Emperor Calus. Unfortunately, part of the reason for that is that in this case, history was quite literally written by the victors, as Calus's rise to power was documented in the most favorable light possible in the history books written after his ascension, meaning that all of the information we have comes from Calus and his particular loyalists, so take it with a grain of salt. Calus's reign saw a marked departure from the staunch military first and only leanings of previous administrations. One of his first acts was to assassinate the entirety of the Praetorate, storming into one of their meetings with armed guards, guns blazing, while giving a speech about how their time was over. Thereafter, he granted all legionnaires full citizenship in order to maintain their loyalty, and deposed most everyone who benefited from the Praetorate's reign.
After that, if the histories are to be believed, Calus ushered in the Cabal's golden age. He transformed the Empire from a nation of war to a people focused on art, philosophy, learning, indulgence, and excess. Though to be fair, these were bounties that all full members of the Empire had access to rather than just the elite or the select few. The Cabal continued to conquer and expand, but new peoples were folded into the Empire. Their societies melded with that of the Cabal. Their greatest technological, social, economic, or philosophical marvels absorbed and added to the Cabal's own, growing the Empire's culture as a whole. Entire worlds were dedicated to housing the knowledge of countless societies. Whole planets acted as museums, gardens, vaults for weapons, both mundane and doomsday, and everything in between. For centuries, and again, possibly millennia, they're really vague on that part, Calus led his people to excess, fine living, and growth. However, he treated his militaristic pursuits as secondary, a means to maintain the lifestyle of the Empire, even polluting the rites of combat until people stopped invoking it altogether. Eventually, even some of his closest allies came to see Calus as a despot who was leading the Empire to ruin, and a coup was staged, led by Ghaul, a gladiator who years before had been uplifted by Emperor Calus himself and made a leader of his armies. Ghaul, alongside other dissidents, including Calus's bodyguards, his head general, and even Calus's own daughter, deposed the Emperor. However, they recognized that despite their issues with him, the Emperor was far too well-liked to kill without potentially causing an insurrection. So, they threw the Emperor and all of his loyalists they could find onto a massive ship that Calus had previously constructed, the Leviathan, set it on a course into deep space, and destroyed the controls, marooning Calus and his loyalists away from the Empire for a time.
In his absence, Ghaul and the others returned the Cabal to a people for whom war and conflict were at the forefront of society. Vassal races had citizenship and importance curtailed, reduced to mere cogs in the imperial machine. They even changed combat and military doctrine, focusing on blocky, tough, quickly manufactured ships meant to work in concert in large fleets, rather than individually powerful cruisers that could function in lesser numbers. The remnants of the Praetorate who helped with the coup were reinstated, and though they were initially certain they could make a puppet of Ghaul, they learned quickly that he would not be governed, and instead they stood subservient to his will. Ghaul, for his part, rejected the title of Emperor and named himself Dominus of the Cabal Empire, declaring the time of emperors and debauchery were over. For centuries, this new militant Cabal raided the stars, expanding its territory and conquering everything in its path, while seemingly leaving much of the expanded learning and knowledge of Calus's empire in the past. During those same centuries, Calus and the Loyalists floated through space, with Calus alone holding the knowledge of how to repair the ship, but wallowing in betrayal and misery for more than 50 years before he finally came to a sort of weirdly happy nihilistic awakening. Filled with the realization that everything ends, Calus resolved to enjoy life to the fullest before he died, and among other things, that meant seeking vengeance on those who betrayed him, and eventually reclaiming his throne.
Centuries down the line, Cabal expeditionary forces made their way to Earth's Sol system, the setting for the Destiny games. They set up mining operations on Mars before eventually encountering both the Vex and the Guardians of Humanity. Despite suffering heavy losses, the Cabal attempted to hold fast in the solar system, as evidently, when a legion leaves on an expedition, their citizenry is revoked, meaning they can only return in victory. Over the course of numerous defeats at the hands of the Guardians and complications from contact with all the other races in the system, Cabal numbers dwindled, and despite the Guardians' best efforts, distress signals detailing the forces they were up against were sent back to Cabal High Command. It took 2 years for the Cabal to marshal a response, but when they did, they dropped the Red Legion, one of their most elite armies, headed by Dominus Ghaul himself, on the Guardians.
Upon arrival, Ghaul set up a doomsday weapon that would annihilate the sun if he was defeated, and figured out how to cut the Guardians off from their space magic, initially rendering them a little more than a nuisance, and repelled an assassination attempt by former Emperor Calus's agents who had followed Ghaul here once Calus had learned that Ghaul had left the seat of Cabal power, theoretically leaving Ghaul vulnerable. The Guardians disabled the Doomsday weapon, slew Ghaul, and regained their space magic powers, breaking the leadership of both the Cabal Empire and the Red Legion. After Ghaul's death, Calus showed up in the system, offering to allow the Legion's Cabal to rejoin him after Ghaul's death. Infighting, desertions, and defeats hounded the Cabal's fleet thereafter.
With the Legion's leadership broken, the Cabal scattered into cells, some working together, some for their own agendas. Some joined Calus, others fought Calus's interests, even trying unsuccessfully to steal control of the Leviathan from him. However, such efforts were rebuffed by the Guardians, of whom Calus had made loose allies. Meanwhile, the Guardians, Vex, Fallen, and Hive all continued battling each other and the Cabal, giving the Cabal no time to breathe or recuperate, and the longer time went on, the more desperate they became. The Vex had the capability to manipulate time. After they suffered major defeats at the hand of the Guardians, the Cabal sought to use Vex technology to turn back time and undo their initial defeat when the Doomsday weapon was shut down and Ghaul was slain. However, they were ultimately unsuccessful. Thereafter, they attempted to slingshot the Doomsday weapon, which had still been in orbit around the Sun, at Earth to destroy the Guardians in their home. In this effort, the Cabal were also unsuccessful.
After this string of defeats, the final straw that might well break the Cabal's back fell. Back on the Cabal's capital world, Caiatl, the daughter of Calus, now calling herself Empress of the Cabal, was unable to stop a ritual by one of her generals that summoned the Hive War God onto their planet, along with a seemingly innumerable army of Hive. Caiatl and her people were forced to abandon their homeworld, and they traveled to the Sol system. Caiatl's plan was to enlist the aid of the Guardians, as they had killed several Hive gods already. However, Cabal politics being what they were, Caiatl knew that if she asked the Guardians for help, her counselors would see this as weakness. So when the Guardians were approached, she demanded that the Guardians play a subservient role in partnership against the Hive and the Guardians' other enemies. The Guardians refused this demand, obviously, and the two factions engaged in small-scale war games for a time, with the understanding that the winner would be able to set terms for the potential partnership. The Guardians won, and Caiatl helped prevent the assassination of one of the Guardians' leaders from a rogue faction within the Cabal. These combinations of events have led to a tense truce of sorts between the Guardians and the Cabal, with most, if not all, of the Cabal's forces now in the Sol system. Whatever happens next will likely determine the fate of the Cabal as a people.
And that's basically the Cabal. Hulking war machine of the Destinyverse. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like and share it with someone you know might like it. If you have ideas for videos you'd like to see in the future, do like Nocturnal74 and let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more videos, hit that subscribe button, and if you'd like to see our Let's Plays, follow the link in the description and subscribe to our Let's Play channel.
In the meantime, this has been True Masters and Morons, signing off.